Hello and welcome to what is now the first episode of A Strong Recommend, where I gave Alex here approximately 1.5 seconds warning that I was starting. I'm your host, Dalton. I just said
I'm your
this
host,
guy's name.
Alex.
There you go. You don't get to introduce yourself. Already did it.
My name's
Already did
John.
it. Too late.
I don't know who this Alex guy is, but yeah.
I say that this is now the first episode because in actuality, we've already recorded like 5 of them, I think.
Yeah, about
but
5 now.
But we hadn't been posting yet. And I figured, oh, we're recording this while it is immediately relevant. Let's just launch with this as episode 1. So, in what was going to be episode 1, we explained our formatting in detail and what's changed from our last podcast. If you were a listener of Yet Another Geek Show, we're going to save the explanation for that episode. And for now, we're just going to talk about WandaVision.
Cool.
That's what you're here for.
Yeah, let's talk about Long Division.
All right, so we both finished watching the show maybe an hour ago.
Yeah, give or take, yeah.
You waited until like 3 or 4 days ago to even start the show and did not have the misery. The utter misery of waiting week to week.
It's a skill of mine where I have patience and I don't need to be on the bleeding edge of watching everything brand new. I mean, I also don't have tons of social media presence either, so it doesn't really, like I maybe browse like Facebook like once a day.
You had less issues avoiding spoilers.
Yeah. So my thing is I usually binge shows. I don't usually I'm not like on the next week of Dragon Ball Z. You know what I mean? Like
I miss this though. I miss this so much.
This was good. This
like the week to week thing though, because I miss like the discussion in between and the anticipation and like, okay, I just called it misery because an episode would end and I'm like, now I gotta wait another week and all I have until then is an episode of Attack on Titan because that's the only other show I'm watching as it goes along. So it's like those are my 2 happy days of the week, and then I have to look forward to.
Just an FYI, Doctor Stone season 2 is now on Funimation. If you were, it's also like per episode. I don't know what the release date is. Yeah,
that's right. I did hear that recently. Also, Falcon and the Winter Soldier starts in 2 weeks, so Marvel's not giving breaks between content anymore.
Valid.
I am under the impression there is Marvel content every week for the rest of the year because between shows they're going to do a making of featurette. So they even have that in the small gaps. Anyway, I miss this week to week thing because even though I just called it suffering, like this is a little bit of a mystery show. Maybe mystery is not the right word, but like there's
what's going to happen next.
There's cliffhangers. Yeah. And it's cliffhangers regarding like characters you can do so much with material.
Hey, before we continue, I just want to warn everyone here that this is a spoiler discussion. So before we go any further, you've been warned.
Well, before we go any further, is this a strong recommend?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Okay.
you had no idea what my thoughts and opinions were on the show because we just shut up in between. So
in between you starting and finishing it.
Yeah.
I haven't heard anyone. I mean, I've heard people not love it, but I haven't heard anyone like actually dislike it.
I have, but I'll leave them out of it.
But back to this week to week thing though, like it does all end in cliffhangers, and it's with material they could do anything with, like source material that like it's such a strange beast adapting comic books, because when it's like a novel you're adapting, okay, you're just putting the novel on screen, you're making changes to make it work better, but there's one story and you're figuring out the best way to recreate that story. Or the worst way sometimes. Sometimes they go with that direction.
Yeah.
But with comic books, it's like no, like Wanda has been in thousands of comic books. You can't just tell her comic book story. You have to pick out what particular moments of her history you can work into a sequential story that happens to line up with the beats already being done by other Marvel characters being adapted. And there's just so much freedom and flexibility with what you can do that there's just so much room to speculate
right
with this stuff. Uh, I'm sure people have been seeing the words House of M thrown around all over the place. You may be familiar with what it is, or you may not, but
House
it's a
of
big
Meatballs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
House
and
of Mesothelioma.
and it's a thing where like there's inspirations from that here, but they didn't tell that story. And they might tell that story in whatever she appears in next. There's certainly teases and setup for it, but it's not going to be exactly the same because these adaptations are never one-to-one. My point is, as a more of a former comic book reader, I haven't been reading them regularly in a long while, and I don't remember the minute details of House of M anymore. But even with what I know about smacking microphones, sorry,
House of Microphones,
there's just so much room for speculation.
Yeah.
I do have to say, none of the stuff I speculated about came to fruition.
I was kind of like guessing what was going to happen, like as it sort of was, where I'm like, oh nope, we're wrong, this is what's going to happen. Like just dumb ideas. Like I know, kind of jumping ahead, but like the last episode, I was waiting for the twist to be her son being the Scarlet Witch, because he had the same powers as her. Because it's so there's so much that they could do. You're like, wait a minute,
So you're not too far off, because in the comics, her children are named superheroes. Like they have costumes and names, which are the powers of their mom and their uncle, like we saw here.
Yeah, Evan Peters.
So there's no mantle pass there. But
Ralph Boner.
Good old Ralph Boner.
Mr. Boner.
On the topic of things that don't quite go where you're speculating.
That was Guardians humor. Like, I wasn't expecting Guardians humor in WandaVision.
But it ended up being like a lot smaller than I anticipated, honestly, which is fine. But when you have like the introduction of her children, which is a House of M thing, and to my recollection, like they are created during the House of M. They are wiped from existence during the House of M story. They are at some point, through ridiculous comic book logic, brought back again, as the post-credit scene kind of teased.
Yeah.
So they didn't really do House of M, but there's pieces of it here all over the place. And then there's weird bits of dialogue that seem to tease Mephisto all over the place.
Yeah.
And the speculation there did get dumb, because people would watch this and they would go on TikTok or Twitter and they'd be like, oh, is Agnes really Mephisto? Is Evan Peters really Mephisto? Is that rabbit really Mephisto? And they'd just look for him all over the place. And I'm like, look, if Mephisto's here, like,
you'll know it.
It doesn't need to be a tease that someone else is really Mephisto. Like,
right.
What is the point of that?
Yeah, exactly. I know, like, the first 2 episodes for me, I had no idea what was going on. But as soon as I seen the person that played Agnes, I'm like, that's intentional. Like, immediately. Like for some reason that lady, that actress, I can't remember her name. But I've only seen her in like comedic roles.
Sure.
Like in like she was in Step Brothers. Will Ferrell's I believe older brother, his wife. She played him, and like I've seen her in other things, but I've never seen her play a serious role. So as soon as I seen her in the first episode, I'm like, okay, she's got to be significant, because like I don't expect this to have much comedy. And I mean, granted, I was fairly wrong, because there's a lot of comedy, but like I wasn't, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So we'll stay on her in particular because she's a place to speculate about.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this came from my comic book knowledge or if I would have gotten here without it,
Mm-hmm.
but I did call immediately from like as soon as she appears that, oh, that's Agatha Harkness, and it was Agatha all along. If I wasn't a comic book reader, I wouldn't have known her name, of course, but I don't know if I would have pieced together and guessed that she's the villain, that she has some level of
Yeah.
control here, that
Her
she's
name is a play on words of the like her actual name.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
I wouldn't have known that.
shortening. So you wouldn't have known the
Mm.
name, but like you were fishy of her right
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
And so when she finally says it, when she's like, "I'm Agatha Harkness," my reaction was basically, "Oh my god, I can't believe it." like,
How did you
okay,
do this?
like that's the one thing that like I definitely got right, and it
Yeah.
like barely counted as speculation to me. It was so obviously the case. Quicksilver,
That
that
killed
got
me.
weird.
That absolutely killed me. Because I didn't realize that the original actor in Age of Ultron,
Yeah, Aaron Taylor
Pietro,
Johnson.
Aaron Taylor Johnson. I didn't realize that was Kick-Ass until you pointed it out to me. And you said my favorite thing I've ever heard said about anybody. And you were like, dude had a second puberty after Kick-Ass. And you're not wrong. And it's really funny because like Evan Peters and him were both in the movie. Because like I remember him as Ass Kicker, and then you pointed out that there was the joke at the Halloween episode, and like it got all kinds of weird there with him.
And what's that about? Because like the multiverse stuff we were kind of waiting for.
Yeah.
It never really happened, which it kills in retrospect some of the fun of speculating. Like we know the story's going to go there because we know that Wanda is in Doctor Strange 2 and it is called the Multiverse of Madness. So we know the universe is going there. But we kind of expected it to start here. And so when they brought in Evan Peters, we all went, "Oh shit, did they just like immediately work the Fox universe into this? Are we already there and they're just not going to explain it for a few episodes?" And to be honest though, I'm relieved now, even though I said that them turning that into not a multiverse thing it kind of bummed me out for speculation purposes, making the show smaller than it seemed like it would be.
Yeah.
I was still kind of relieved because when I was fully convinced that this was somehow a connection to the Fox X-Men universe, I was actually bummed about it. I remember like before that episode actually came out where he's revealed at the end, that information had already leaked. And so I was seeing people say that he is or isn't there as Quicksilver on like Twitter. I guess an actual scene got leaked or like a single shot that I didn't see, so I didn't know people knew for sure. I thought of it more as a rumor, but I went on Twitter before the episode came out and I was like, am I the only one that doesn't want this to happen? Am I alone in not wanting that universe to cross over? Because there are movies there that I love. And I'm excited for the Spider-Man movies that appear to be crossing over, even though a lot of them are not great.
Right.
But the difference is I pride Marvel Studios so much on their continuity and consistency, and they're not perfect about it. People can point out a handful of places where they screw it up, especially if the TV stuff they weren't properly in control of gets included, trying to piece continuity together. But the Fox universe is so inconsistent that I don't even want it to be a part of the multiverse of this.
Right.
That continuity is just such a mess from the moment First Class happens, and I love First Class. And then Days of Future Past comes, and I love that movie even more, but the continuity is even more of a mess, and it just got worse every time Fox made a movie. So they would make movies that are great if you pretended they were the only X-Men movie.
Right.
Because it didn't make any sense once you tied them together. So as much as I love some of those renditions of the characters, as much as like Evan Peters being one of them, people kept hyping up the possibility of like a really big surprise character at the end of this show. So people would say, Fassbender's Magneto, Wolverine, or Professor X. They would call out specifically renditions from the X-Men movies and be like, I think this character is going to show up in that character. And I'm like, no, I don't want this.
And besides, isn't Hugh Jackman done playing Wolverine? Like, that wouldn't...
He's done, but people are done with characters all the time. It doesn't mean much.
Kind of like how Garth Brooks always says he's going to be done and then does one more tour. And then just keeps coming back.
Or frankly, Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, his contract was up with Iron Man 3.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And he just kept like renewing it regularly for 1 or 2 movies at a time after that.
Yeah.
Which might be why there were no more solo Iron Man movies after that.
Okay.
Or because he's still the core of every other MCU movie he shows up in afterwards anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
So he didn't really need his own anymore.
But
mutants are another place where the show ended up being a lot smaller than I expected. I took for granted that mutants to some extent would be introduced by the end of this show. And they did nothing to go there at all. Some of the speculation for it was really bad. Bad speculation's been being done for years about how to get mutants into the MCU. But for instance, Monica Rambeau getting her powers, crossing the hex several times. I kept seeing people go, her DNA is getting rewritten. That's set up for mutants. And
I can see it.
And that makes sense, except that it's not that you need to be a comic book reader or know things about the comic books to have fun speculating with the show. I'm not saying that. But before you go online and share that speculation that, hey, I think Monica Rambeau is becoming a mutant here, maybe Google the character real quick and see that she already is her own hero that's not a mutant. Like, it makes sense to come to that conclusion, but like, Google it before you go online with it.
Right. So what is she like exactly? Like, because I'm gonna out myself right now. There's a few movies that I haven't seen in the Marvel universe. That's Doctor Strange, Ant-Man, and Ant-Man and the Wasp, and Captain Marvel. And you told me that Monica Rambeau gets introduced in Captain Marvel as a little girl because the movie takes place in the 90s.
Yeah. So in the comic books, the MCU is doing Captain Marvel sort of strangely. In the comic books, there's been several people that have been called Captain Marvel, and the MCU's Captain Marvel was like the most recent. I don't know if there's been more since her. As far as I know, she's still Captain Marvel in the comics. But Monica, I believe, I've never actually read anything with her in it, but Monica, I believe, was a Captain Marvel before she was.
Is it kind of like how there's like several Green Lanterns, there's like several Captain Marvels at one time?
I don't think it's usually at one time, but it is a mantle that...
Oh, okay. Kind of like how Thor is technically a mantle.
Yeah, and so the movie also has a character, Mar-Vell, not a human, has a character, Mar-Vell, who no, Mar-Vell's not green. You're thinking of you're asking me about the post-credit scenes. Gotcha.
Yeah.
No, but that does come from Captain Marvel.
Is that Guardians? Is that setting up Guardians and Thor?
Not to get too far off topic from WandaVision, but that alien race, the Skrulls,
is that the same as Gamora?
Is present in Captain Marvel and is present in the post credits of Spider-Man Far From Home.
Which I didn't see. I forgot. I didn't add that to my list.
It appears to be set up for another Disney Plus show centered around Nick Fury called Secret Invasion. It's a race of shapeshifters. That's what that's about. But anyway, the character of Mar-Vell, who, when you get around to Captain Marvel, is in there, is the original comic book Captain Marvel.
Oh.
So basically, even though the MCU wanted to start with Carol Danvers, they just, whatever their reasons were for picking that one, besides, at the moment in the comic books, she was Captain Marvel and the most recognizable of them. They wanted to start with her for whatever narrative reasons, but they also seem to want to pay respect to other Captain Marvels. So they're finding ways to squeeze them into the story anyway.
Gotcha. So this isn't stuff that you would necessarily need to if you want to watch the shows, this is stuff you need to know from the movies, but you don't need to know things from the shows to know the movies.
Yeah, not seeing Captain Marvel didn't really affect your experience.
Yeah, it didn't really
with
ruin
Monica
the show for
at
me.
all.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people watching this show without having seen any MCU, which on one hand is horrifying to me. Because you basically
and your
just
Iron Man Captain America shirt going on.
Yeah, you basically just jumped into season 25 of a show is what you do there, starting at this point. But Disney Plus does have a short, I don't want to call it a series, that's not really what it is, but a collection of recaps to prepare you for particular characters that are getting a show now. Maybe it was Marvel Legends, something like that. There's a series on Disney Plus where basically you'd have an episode that is Scarlet Witch, and it's just a recap of everything that's happened to her in the MCU so far, so that you can start with her show without catching up.
Okay.
And I guess I don't know if there's any more yet, or if you still have to wait for more coming down the line, but I guess they're gonna just do that for each character coming, who they're basically covering every hero who's been in a movie but hasn't gotten their own. So Falcon and Winter Soldier haven't had their own movies, so they'll both get one, or Vision, I guess.
Do you think they might do a show for because of was it I'm terrible with names, Chad Berwick, Black Panther, or what was his name?
Chadwick Boseman.
Chadwick Boseman. Why did I think Chadwick Berwick? Bleh, close, but now I feel bad. But do you think they're gonna do a series about her, maybe getting the mantle of Black Panther?
It's hard to speculate what they're doing with that now. We know that Black Panther 2 is close to going into production, but I don't really even know that Shuri's getting the mantle like she does in the comics. They're kind of not acknowledging how they're approaching this at all. At the same time, they've come out and announced recently that Ryan Coogler, who directed and I think wrote the first movie and is returning for Black Panther 2, they've announced that he's started his own production studio where he is going to work hand in hand with Marvel to make more Wakanda stuff. So I think he's actually making a series for them, I think called Wakanda.
Okay.
So they are doing a lot more in that world, but nobody actually knows what Black Panther 2 is now.
Is it Wakanda or Wakanda?
Yeah, you're right. Wakanda.
Oh, Wakanda.
Wakanda. I think I heard too many jokes of people being like, "What kind of whatever is this?" Just heard that pun too many times, and it's ruining my pronunciation now.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, so we're kind of meandering into the approach
of
Marvel and Disney.
We're doing the speculating thing because I didn't get to do it when I watched Wandavision, so that's cool.
So we're wandering into Marvel and Disney making shows at all like this, and this is different from all the TV we've had before. There's been plenty of MCU TV, but none of it was really MCU. I hesitated there because people have been arguing for years about, the Netflix shows are canon. No, they're not. And yes, they are. And it doesn't matter. And I am not joining in your debate about it.
Cool.
But this is the first time Marvel Studios has been behind it. And for now on, Marvel Studios is always behind it. And the shows will matter. And you cannot keep up on the universe if you don't watch these.
How are they going to do a Kick-Ass show now that they've introduced Ralph Boner? How? I want a Kick-Ass show.
Wow. I've meandered so far away from Kick-Ass, and there's a lot more Kick-Ass comic book material to cover that never got done in those movies.
Yeah, like I never watched or I never read Kick-Ass 3.
I managed to meander so far away from that conversation where we were talking about Quicksilver and like its relevance to us expecting a multiverse, when she just like weirdly acknowledged the Kick-Ass reference. What did that mean in the show now?
Right.
Because in my head, to clarify for people, Kick-Ass isn't a Marvel Universe character, but it's a property that was published by a Marvel subsidiary. So
it's sub-Marvel.
Yeah, and they didn't have anything to do with that movie, but the acknowledgement there made me go like, I don't know, since the whole Quicksilver thing to begin with seems like a weird multiverse acknowledgement that it turns out wasn't really. It turns out this show didn't really acknowledge the multiverse in any way. That weird Kick-Ass reference made me go like did she just acknowledge a universe in which Kick-Ass exists? Right. Is that what happened? And now that's definitely, do we remember the city that
Kick-Ass takes place? Is it Westview?
I doubt it, but I do not recall. I don't know. That's a weird moment now. At the time, It was exciting for me. Not that I thought they would do anything with it, but like, just what a weird reference. And now I'm like, in the context of the show, it doesn't make sense though. Why did that give her pause like that?
Not to mention like all the like weird, like I noticed with like in the end credit scene, the second end credit scene, like it was sort of a nod to Doctor Strange because she was astral projecting, or the weird nods to Hydra.
Weird nods to Hydra
in the commercials.
Oh, throughout the show. I thought you were saying I thought you were saying at the ending in the same scene. I was like, I missed something there.
Like the nod to like the Stark toaster and then the Hydra watch.
Yeah.
And the Hydra lotion or soap or whatever the hell it was.
I'm glad you were following along with what was going on there.
Yeah.
Where
I mean, it would make sense because like the whole show, my hair is a wreck. It's that stuff makes sense because it's sort of like a subconscious thing for her with Hydra.
Yeah. So the commercials and are basically Stark. Like following along her traumas. And it's cool of the show to like really emphasize how much that character has really been through without ever being a main character, because you might like you might have seen all these movies once, and if I rattled off her story so far to you, you might go, yeah, I remember that, and I remember this and that. But you might not actually put together how much trauma this character's been through until you see it all laid out in a row.
Wait a minute. If I remember correctly, wasn't the toaster also a dud in the commercial? Much like the missile?
I don't recall.
Like, I feel like that was a thing.
At this point, since I watched the show as it was running, that was 2 months ago for me. So
yeah, the whole show is such a mind flare. Like there's so much to try and pay attention to that you tend to forget the little details like that. I'm gonna have to look it up and then let you know if you can edit it here at this point if I was right or wrong.
Well, and so that's why it's a little bit. That's why it's a little bit of a bummer for me that like the show starts out as such a mystery with so much room to go wherever they want and so much room for my head to go wild. But after episode 4, where they basically just recap the previous 3 episodes for people that are still confused, there's not a lot of mystery left anymore, and I'm like, oh, all my speculating kind of went out the window.
Mm-hmm.
The story kept kind of getting smaller and smaller instead of bigger, except the introduction of Quicksilver, where it looked like it was going to get bigger, and then
Yeah.
it wasn't really. So the show never at any point sets up the multiverse or mutants, doesn't do a whole lot to set up Doctor Strange 2,
Mm-hmm.
other than show her astral project at the end. And so I just expected that the show was going to get bigger and bigger, and by the end, it would feel like a bigger deal in the grand scheme of things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a problem though. Like it's a bummer that a lot of the speculation was for nothing. But after this 2 months of the show running, when most people are done watching it, and it's building its legacy moving forward, what matters is if it was a good story, not if it managed to set anything up.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
It works on its own, and that's all it needed to do. And it's not like her character didn't go anywhere. Her character has moved forward a lot, and that's what ultimately matters.
I'll tell you what though. I know when I first started watching it, and you said, "Dude, the show is really good," and I'm like, "Okay." And I watched like the first episode, and I was like, this feels like an Adult Swim kind of comedy in a way, where like you know that they know what's going on, and you're just waiting for things to start slipping through the cracks.
Yeah,
which I wasn't quite wrong with, but like during the whole first episode, I'm like, what's going on? And then like the dude's like choking to death, and the wife is just laughing, and I'm like, okay, here we go. Is when I started like noticing like the different camera angles, for example, like where it was in the beginning, it was just like, here's the stage, this is all you see, no matter what, like whether the person's center in frame or not, that kind of thing. And then you start noticing like the camera angle is shifting, and like the weird panning and zooming that wasn't a thing back then.
They break into angles that don't suit the era.
You notice they're breaking the fourth wall.
Yeah.
I just want to say, like, they did a damn good job at recreating the 50s, the 60s, those eras of television. Like I know somebody in particular who wasn't a big fan of it. And they're like, it's boring, it's been done before. And I just keep thinking, like, I mean, it's okay to have that opinion, but at the same time, you have to look at
the show how they're
mocking.
Before.
Right, this show hasn't been done before.
Yeah.
But like you have to look at how they're either, you could say, mocking or imitating, whichever one you prefer, but they do such a very good job at nailing the aesthetic and the environment that you can't say that they don't.
They brought in the Dick Van Dyke as a consultant.
Seriously?
For that accuracy.
Wow. Okay, I didn't know that.
They went that far. They committed to the bit hard, and I feel so bad for people that couldn't bring themselves to enjoy the first 3 episodes, because to me, the first 3 episodes are unfortunately the best of the show. That's not to say it gets bad as it goes along, but that's where it was the most interesting for me. Was
because you were waiting to see what slipped through the cracks.
Yeah, watching the cracks to slowly emerge, and then wondering what those cracks mean. When you saw something like the toy helicopter coming in and being in color,
yeah,
like seeing that kind of stuff and speculating, okay, what is really happening at this moment, was a lot more interesting than any mystery that was left over. There wasn't a lot of mystery left over after season 4 explained it. It got
episode
to be
4.
What did I say?
Season 4.
Season 4. Wow. Yeah. So after after episode 4 explains it all, other than the mystery of what the hell's going on with Quicksilver here, I mean, there wasn't any more mystery. There was still story, and there was still where will this story go? But
who is Mr. Dick Joke, by the way? Like, who is Ralph Boner?
Nobody.
Okay.
Nobody, so, not a character.
Okay. I was just making sure, because like with having Quicksilver's powers, I didn't know if that was like an Agnes thing or Agatha. Like, I don't know if she just gave him the powers, whatever.
That's how I'm interpreting it. I've seen a lot of
Hmm.
people be like, well, if that's not Quicksilver, where did the Quicksilver powers come from? And I'm like, dude, it's a show about magic. Who gives a shit?
Right, right.
It
This
came
this
from
isn't
magic.
superhero logic. This is literally magic logic.
I if Wanda can literally spawn a life from nothing that
Yeah.
has Quicksilver powers, then Agnes can just give someone Quicksilver powers.
Fair
We
enough.
don't need to debate this issue.
Speaking of issues to debate, uh the white version of Vision, the dude that looks like Ultron but just spray painted white. Does that mean Vision's back?
That version is still around when the episode ends.
Right. But they don't show him after he says I am Vision.
Right. So basically to me, White Vision is a thing in the comics. I don't remember the details and minutia of it.
Please tell me that's not his actual name.
What's that?
White Vision?
No, not White Vision. It's just the Vision. Just the Vision. There are time periods in the comics where he is white. And my recollection of how that works, I don't even know if I read these comics or if I just saw YouTube videos on them. But he is a version of the Vision who had his memories wiped and behaves a lot more like a robot than like a person, like what we saw here. Okay. It's not a thing in the comics where there are two Visions and they're fighting each other. Like, that's not a thing. 90% of this show is an original story.
Because I was waiting for the point where he looks at Will Smith and winks at him and he knows he's onto a trick. And then like they overtake the evil robots.
So things are pulled from the comics. Like the whole sitcom setup, the first few episodes, is less weird if you're a comic book reader and you know that creating an alternate reality is a thing Wanda can do.
You mean Marvel can do?
That Wanda can do. Create an alternate reality. And I guess that's not really what happened here. She took over a town and changed what the buildings are formed like. So it's not literally an alternate reality. Well, but you have a better picture of what her powers can do, and you know that she's done similar things. Westview and this TV sitcom universe and this house that Vision bought and all of this, like, this is not comic book. This is Newgrounds. This is them doing what they want with very loose pulls from here and there. So White Vision is a very loose pull from the comics. Using him in this way is new. But I think with what we know here and what we know from comics, we can just kind of assume that Vision is still around. He might even still function as an Avenger, but he does not have the memories of between being killed and now. He did not live
that was
in this
Wanda's
house.
Vision that knew.
Yeah, so he did not live in this house with Wanda and have children. So I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do with him from here.
When they got into the Modern Family era of television, and it just seemed like a one-liner, but when Vision's sitting there in the chair and he's just like, I don't know, she's telling me about this and it feels like it happened to somebody else entirely. I thought that was just going to be a joke.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't realize that was going to be very literal. You know, like, it's those little things. Like, I know, for example, like, jokes like that had happened where, like in Guardians 2, for example, when Star-Lord's dad, when he turns into Patrick, or was it David Hasselhoff? Or Patrick Swayze?
Why don't I remember?
But in Guardians 2, he does that to
haven't
insult.
Seen it since the theater.
He does that to insult Star-Lord, and a lot of people thought that was funnier versus like aggravating.
It didn't read correctly for people.
Yeah, it didn't read correctly for a lot of people, but that was genuinely just like, oh, low blow, dude. Like, what the
Yeah.
hell, you know?
Yeah, yeah. It was a sick burn, not a funny
Mm-hmm.
joke.
Right. And it's in the similar, like, not, I don't want to say necessarily cut from the same cloth, but like
Yeah.
of like the same like dark reality of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that it didn't happen to him, that he
Yeah.
is in fact not real.
Mm-hmm. I wasn't
I get
expecting his corpse to not be stolen by Wanda. Like,
well,
I
yeah.
totally thought
So
that she would have done it because she's very unstable at this point and makes total sense.
yeah, so that's a place for speculation. You spend the first half of the show thinking like, what is this vision? Is she manipulating his corpse around and
Right.
people are seeing his corpse as something it's
Mm-hmm.
not? Um, or is she doing this to a random like existing person?
Mm-hmm.
Or there's just a lot of versions of what could be happening there. Um, and I was a little surprised that he was a creation of hers once we I was surprised that a vision that wasn't the original vision with his real body was starting to figure out what was going on.
Yeah.
That's something she gave power to, was figuring it out. So I took for granted and was wrong that it was actually his body, but um
Mm-hmm.
it is what it is. But speculation, you said Ultron. I thought for sure White Vision was going to speak and be Ultron. That's
That's what
not a
I thought
comic book
too.
thing. Not a comic book thing at all, but I thought for sure.
Right. Or
And it's
like I said earlier in the episode that we're doing, um,
mm,
I thought for sure that her kid, the one with the
mhm,
magic powers,
mhm,
was eventually going to be the Scarlet Witch.
mhm,
Just because like there's so much speculation. Like, he just now got his powers, and like I could see like Wanda starting to lose to Agatha, and then boom, next thing you know, like,
mhm.
I mean, he'd be the Scarlet Warlock, of course, but or Scarlet Witch, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but like I could see that being an upsetting turn of events where you're like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, what? Do you know what I mean?
It would be a surprise for comic book readers
Yeah.
because this whole the Scarlet Witch thing being like some
The end all
thing
be
that she
all.
inherited,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that's all about, like as far as I know, that's not comic book.
As far as you know, comic readers, don't add us, or add us and then share,
Yeah,
please.
I mean, it's not unusual for some random Marvel comic to establish some deeper thing that every writer chooses to forget about. So it could
Mm-hmm.
be in there somewhere, and I don't know
Right.
about it. But traditionally, that's not how she's treated. It's not a mantle. They're treating it like the Dark Phoenix, where it's like
Mm-hmm.
an entity that like enters your body and soul and gives you power and like works together with you is how the show made it sound.
Mm-hmm.
And Scarlet Witch is not that as far as I know.
Right. Also, I just realized the foreshadowing of her dressing up as the Scarlet Witch in Halloween
Mhm.
episode, and then she actually gets the legit costume, which the legit costume is
Yeah.
sweet. Like,
It looks so good.
it looks, yeah, it was so cool.
Uh it looks super good. And yeah, it was really funny to see like the silly comic book version of it, and then
Mm-hmm.
well, the Halloween costume version of it, and then still see it adapted into the real thing. I still don't know what it's about that she was given like her I have to use the word vision. I whatever, her vision of the Scarlet Witch with that costume. It's interesting that we get that reveal afterwards, like the Halloween happens, and then we see
Mm-hmm.
later that a
PlayStation 1 versus
while
PlayStation
back
5.
she had that vision. And so it's like,
Yeah,
oh, she modeled this costume off of
like a
this.
prophecy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know what all of that means because, again, it's not a comic book thing. I don't know if she was seeing the future, if she was seeing another universe. Um, Maybe she was seeing another universe where the Scarlet Witch is a mutant and Doctor Strange will show her that universe. I've had speculation for years, and they didn't really go in this direction. They still could. The show didn't help get in this direction, but for years, even before Disney acquired the rights to mutants and X-Men, people would speculate, how do you get mutants into this universe? Because it would be really weird to just go, oh, by the way, there's been mutants here the whole time and we haven't acknowledged them. Like, you have to do something. Like, Marvel has too solid of a continuity and like explanations for things to just, oh, and by the way, there were X-Men. We never acknowledged it, but they were here the whole time. Don't worry about it. And somehow had no effect on Civil War or anything.
Right.
And my answer had always been to do a reverse version of a comic book thing where there's like an iconic moment of her declaring during like a mental breakdown, no more mutants. And at this moment, no more mutants are born. And of the existing mutants, they all either lose their powers completely or become significantly weaker. I expected, maybe not expected, but just proposed as the way I would do it for years, even before they got the rights, that you have Doctor Strange. You kind of start getting the vibe from the first Doctor Strange movie that they'll eventually explore multiverses. I always thought you make Doctor Strange show Wanda, and they're both working with magic, so there's your reason for them to interact. And I don't know, maybe they're going to interact now. She's in his movie, so maybe they are going this way. You have them interact and have him show her that she already did that. And that this whole time we've been watching a universe that is a version where she already declared no more mutants. It would be functioning differently from how it does in the comics, because in the comics, to my recollection, it's not like, oh, the Earth forgot mutants existed. They just no longer do. They're not like wiped from people's memory and history and stuff. But in this case, I look at it as, oh, her and Petra were mutants. For whatever reason, she declared no more mutants, and we've been seeing that universe this whole time. And Doctor Strange could expose to her that, oh, hey, this happened to you. Do you remember that? Like, not intentionally, but just happens to expose that to her. And then she could reverse it and bring those mutants back into the world.
My thoughts here with the Doctor Strange movie, for some reason, I feel like Doctor Strange and Scarlet Witch are going to end up enemies.
It feels that way.
Not knowing anything about the first Doctor Strange movie, because like I said, I got through. Okay, I've tried watching this movie 3 times. Okay.
Okay.
The first time, I had to leave to go to work. The second time, I was in the middle of watching it and trying to record it when we had whatever TV service, and my wife flipped the channel and somehow managed to erase the recording, but it didn't matter because I only had watched half the episode. And then the third time I tried to watch it, I'm pretty sure the power went out. So I don't think I'll ever be able to watch this movie.
Because you've probably seen the first half hour of it 3 times.
Yeah, pretty much. So that's why I've given up on that movie in particular. But I just get the feeling that like Doctor Strange is going to have a very strong sense of justice, and she's not going to. I mean, with the Book of the Damned, and
that he's not going to have a lot of sympathy for what she's been through.
Yeah. Like I know, I don't know if you know much about like lore of the Book of the Damned, where it's created from entirely one person's flesh. That's why the page is kind of like I was paying attention to how they were going to do it. I only know so much about it. I'm not like an occult guy, but
yeah,
I was looking at the pages and trying to see what kind of detail they were going to put into them, and how they were going to play it. But yeah, I could totally see them being at odds, you know, somewhere mid or end of movie, or even beginning.
Yeah, it's it's been a good while since they've announced that she is a main character in that movie. And I immediately assumed it would be as a villain, but I don't think they ever actually said that. So I don't know why I just assumed that to be the case,
Mm-hmm.
but I still kind of feel like it might be.
Um, it's I'm gonna spoil a video game for you, which I doubt you're ever gonna play it. DMC, Devil May Cry,
I
the remake that they made.
Go ahead.
Um, it was because it's not there's nothing going on with it, and spoilers for this game. Where Dante and Virgil didn't know that they were brothers. There was some like science fiction-y way to explain that
Hmm.
they were not half demon, but they were Nephilim instead. And
Hmm.
you start to work together, and at the end of the episode, or at the end of the game, you have to fight your brother Virgil because you beat what the hell is his name? I can't remember. Anyway, you beat the main bad guy, and he goes, "Now no one can get in our way."
Hmm.
And Dante's like, "Whoa, what do you mean?" And he's like, "Well, we're obviously the superior beings to the demons and humans. Like
Yeah.
we deserve to rule over them." And Dante's like, "Nah, man." Like, and
Yeah.
then he becomes the protector of the people while Virgil becomes the enemy.
Sure. Sure. I guess what's kind of odd though, if they want to go that route, is that like the show made really sure to like make her sympathetic at the end. Like not
Yeah.
necessarily to the point where the audience is like forced to forgive her and be like, "Nah, that's okay." But
Hmm.
they try to turn it around and make it more Agnes's fault than hers.
Yeah.
And it's like I don't know, she started out feeling like a villain and then they kind of like backtracked away from it and said, "We don't really want her to feel like a villain."
Hmm.
But then even in the last episode, like her Scarlet Witch costume just makes her look really evil, and Agnes was being really like sinister about what the Scarlet Witch is and is capable of, and was
Yeah.
like, "It's the harbinger of the end of the world," or whatever she said. Or
Yeah. Something like, yeah, she's the end of the world.
I I don't know. I, I'm more inclined to
Yeah.
think that it's going to be something. I don't. It could feel like retread, but I feel like it's going to end up being more similar to this, where she's not really the villain. She's just like being manipulated again. Um, if the Scarlet
Not
Witch is
justified in their actions. Like they're not necessarily like it's us putting the betrayal of them being a good guy on it kind of thing.
like
Where
like
like they're just doing what they do, whether it
like she
happens to
could
be right or wrong
be
is its own thing.
like she could be the antagonist and Doctor Strange could have to stop her from doing something, but I don't see them like making her evil per se. Like it kind of sounds like again, like they're treating the Scarlet Witch like it's a Dark Phoenix kind of thing, where it's its own entity with some amount of its own free will, and that like she'll be at odds with that, and Wanda's not the villain, the Scarlet Witch is, and she's at odds with it. um I don't know if that's what they'll do, but that's not a comic book thing, and it's weird for
Hmm.
them to introduce the Scarlet Witch that way if they're not intending to treat it like two separate entities.
Right, right. Yeah, going off script in this regard is going to kind of open its own, like entirely own different can.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's I look forward to it because I really like the character.
Hmm.
I don't necessarily put it in a good guy bad guy column. I just put it in some shit's happened column.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I kind of hope they go in that way. Because it's not necessarily anti-hero, but somebody who's not necessarily throwing justice into what they do. It's more impulsive and id-like.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even when her and Pietro are introduced in Age
Hmm.
of Ultron,
She only cares about him, no one else.
they're villains, but not really villains. They're
Hmm.
antagonists that need to be stopped. But what is her goal? Even though they technically e- ended up working for Nazis, like that wasn't their understanding of what they were doing.
Hmm.
Their understanding of what they were doing is, we are joining a group that wants to stop Tony Stark. And from
Hmm.
their perspective, that's a noble goal.
Yeah.
So they're being foolish and they're not paying enough attention to what's really going on. Um, but they're not evil. They're not trying to accomplish evil. They're trying to accomplish stop a dude that I blame for bombing my home.
Right. It's a matter of perspective. And I don't know, before we get too existential on that, I think it'll be interesting to see what they do with the character, because it's more perspective based on their perspectives and not necessarily the good guy bad guy shtick that comic books tend to do. And I kind of like that, because like the whole show was meant to keep you guessing. And it's like kind of throwing out like the preordained possible story that was already out there for the character and trying to like write it anew. So I think I'm liking probably what they're going to do without knowing like entirely what the Scarlet Witch's like backstory is, or any like, you know, specific comic arcs or any staples of the series that she's in.
It's kind of cool. It's worth noting for you, if you don't know, that the Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver are introduced as villains in the comics.
Okay.
They are a part of Magneto's League of Evil Mutants. It's not until a while later that his parentage over them is established, but they are introduced as members of that before they become Avengers. And ever since, they've been on and off in regards of treating those characters like heroes or villains. Granted, even Magneto gets that treatment sometimes. Magneto certainly gets story arcs where he's treated as the hero.
Yeah, and there's truces between the X-Men every now and again.
Yeah, and and a lot of heroes get stories where they're kind of the bad guy.
Civil War.
Hell, I remember reading a story, Avengers versus X-Men, where Cyclops kills Professor X, and you would think to yourself, there's no way you can do that and not be a villain. But it's been years and years since I've read that, but to my recollection, like, there was room to debate it, that he might have been doing the right thing. So
right.
So Marvel likes to play around with that, at least in the comics traditionally, but it seems like the MCU moving forward could just keep her in limbo as not necessarily a hero or villain, just kind of deciding what to do with her as they go along. It is strange to not really know what they're going to do with her from this point.
Yeah.
And there's no WandaVision 2. This is a limited series, but it's, with them doing these Disney Plus series now, it's going to be weird to speculate about the future of these characters, where, like, okay, some people are bummed to realize this was a series finale and not a season finale, but it's like, okay, these characters aren't gone, though. You're going to see them again.
Right,
I don't necessarily know where. Like, we know that Scarlet Witch is in Doctor Strange 2, but I don't know if that's where we're going to see her kids again. I know we are going to see them, but will it be there? Who knows? Where are we going to see Vision again? Well, now I'm certain we are, but probably not in Doctor Strange 2. Where is it going to be? They haven't announced another Avengers movie.
Guardians calling it.
I don't know. Anywhere, or something that hasn't been announced
in order
yet
to not be captured.
It could be something that wasn't announced yet. They could announce that Wanda gets another show, but it's not WandaVision because that title was too fitted to this particular story. She could get a show called The Scarlet Witch.
Yeah, exactly. You never know.
It could be anything from this point. So even if they're not getting a season 2, doesn't matter, because this is ultimately an episode of what is season 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah, you never know. You
have
might
more episodes.
Yeah, I mean, you could eventually have a Mr. Boner show. What's so funny? I want a Mr. Boner show. Yeah, me too. But yeah, if you still want to watch the show or watch the series after we talked about it, still go do it. There's tons of little things that you might not notice the first time through, which, who knows, maybe on any given day I'll probably go back and check and look for myself. But yeah, until then, like comment how terrible we are at doing this, and share, and also subscribe.
Goodbye.